Let's talk about the joy of mixed ability classrooms. My name is Dr. Ken Beatty. I'm a professor of education and a textbook writer. I'm interested in mixed ability classrooms, and in this, the fourth of 4 talks, I'm going to be talking about how you can get the most out of a mixed ability classroom. So far, we started off in the first talk discussing what is a mixed ability classroom. We defined it as a place where you have some students who are more able and some students who are less able. Most of the students are in between. Then we talked about 7 factors that influence whether your students will be more able or less able. In the second talk, we concentrated on those less able students and tried to think of ways we could engage them more in learning. In the third talk, we talked about the more able students and tried to find ways that we could challenge them to go beyond the classroom assignments, to do more, and to share what they knew with everyone else. We're going to build on that talk in this one and talk about 4 different ways we can integrate both the less able and the more able students in the classroom, working together. And then we're going to talk about a task and how we can adapt that task in a practical way. Let's start off with a list of 4 key points. The first one to consider is pair work. We want to pair those most able students and those least able students together. It's a problem because the more able students often complain. They say, I don't want to work with him, I don't want to work with her, and they feel that they are not working with someone who is at their own level. But you have to explain to them that actually to really learn something, to really understand it, research shows that the best way to do that is to teach someone else. It's also a privilege. It's a privilege to help others, and within a school situation, you should be encouraging that. The second point is to shift roles in the classroom. We're used to teacher-fronted classes where the teacher talks and says everything and directs everything and is in control of everything and does all the work, except for what the students have to accomplish in their textbooks. But it shouldn't be that way. With my own graduate students, I asked them one time, let's write a list of all the things that a teacher does. And they got busy and they wrote and they wrote and they split into groups and they came back together and they came up with 214 different jobs that a teacher does. I think they could have thought of more. A lot of these had to do with things like materials development or assessment or organizing the classroom. But that was the next question that I asked them that was surprising. I said, which of these jobs can students also do? And the surprise was that almost all of them they could do as well. Students, of course, cannot submit your marks for you, but they can do some teaching. They can do some materials development. And when you get less able students and more able students working together, that teaching continues, but everybody can take on some small role within the classroom. When you give roles to students to do, they rise to the occasion and they are challenged and they want to do a good job and they feel a bigger part of the class. The third point is to vary our expectations. We cannot just expect that we have one assignment and all students have to do it. In the mixed ability classroom, it's better to tailor the assignments in some ways. We want to adapt the assignments for the lower level students and make it sometimes a little more easier, but that can just mean making it more personalized, more about them, or perhaps giving them more time to do it, or giving them another format in which to do it. With the more able students, we want to challenge them. We can find some ways to accomplish both of these at the same time, and I'm going to show those to you as we go through the assignment. The fourth one is to use a combination of formative and summative assessments and to keep them very separate. Formative assessments are all about giving feedback to the students so they know how well they're doing. They know if they're getting the idea, if they're acquiring the knowledge, if it's all making sense to them, because you can give them a test, but you don't take the marks from that test. You don't necessarily take the marks from that assignment. Instead, you let them perhaps put their work into a portfolio. In the portfolio, we can later select certain portions of it for summative assessment. Summative assessment is the assessment that we use to make decisions about whether or not a student should proceed to the next level, if they are ready or not. Let's talk about a task. The task that I'm using is from Move It, Student Book 2. It revolves around the idea of a biography, and students have to write a biography. But in this particular task, all they need to do is to rearrange paragraphs to make sense about the subject's life. The subject is an Italian painter of the Renaissance period who moved to Spain and ended up working in the court of Philip II. It's an interesting story, and it's inspiration for the students to do their own work. In the mixed ability classroom, how can we make this work using the abilities of both the less able students and the more able students? Well, the first thing to do is to put them together in some way. Have them work together, but maybe on an assignment that includes two people. They could be two siblings, a brother and a sister. They could be a father and a son, or a mother and a daughter, or a husband and a wife. They have to pick two people who are in some way related. They work on those two people together. Maybe one is more difficult, and the person who is the more able student is going to do more of the research for that. But that person is also going to help the less able student. Together, they present a project about the two people. It gives a chance for the less able student to see the work habits and the state of mind of the more able student. How do they approach problems? The second type of assignment would be to have the more able students work ahead and complete a biography. So they go out and they do their research and they collect all their facts and figures and they write their assignment. What do we do with the less able student? Well, we could do this. We could ask the less able student to interview the more able student. And on the basis of the interview, asking about their character, the less able student writes a parallel assignment that it seems like an interview, like a newspaper interview of a famous person. So it's changing the genre a little bit, and it's changing the emphasis on research, pushing it towards the more able student and relieving the less able student of those duties. We can also work from the other point of view. We can have a less able student go ahead and finish their biographies. Those less able students then take their biographies to a more able student who has to do something with it. For example, they might decide to change the tense. So the more able student reads through it, maybe gives a few corrections and a little bit of help, asks questions about what is easy or not so easy to understand, and then on the basis of that, write something, say, in the future tense or the past tense, depending on the tense in which it was originally written, just to do something different. Both students are still getting the core information, but they're doing different things with it. The fourth activity is a class-wide one. This is something that would be fun to do if you have a large class or a not so large class, but to find out some group that has as many members in it as does your class. It might be a baseball team, or it might be the characters in a Shakespeare play, or it might be a list of royalty over the years. Each student takes the opportunity to write a biography about one person in that group. Now, the most important and maybe the most difficult people to write about, maybe the most complex stories, those would be taken by the more able students, while the less able students would take those minor characters, those small people in Shakespeare play. They would deal with those ones. altogether, you can see how as a class, everybody would get a better understanding and would come across all sorts of little bits of information about the people and how they all related together. Working in a mixed ability classroom is something we cannot avoid. What we can do is we can make the most of it. Make the most of it by engaging your students, learning as much about them as possible, finding out what they like to do, and finding out ways to motivate them to do more. Challenge your students.